my grandmother lost an arm during the war, and she did everything like anybody else. She was just wonderful. And my grandfather, very intelligent, and they were, what else can I tell you? They were wonderful people.
What were their names?
Their names were Benzian Gorelick and Mali Gorelick. And they lived with my mother and dad for quite a while. And they helped to raise me when I was very little because my mother went to work picking potatoes, and they were home and they took care of me. Should I continue?
Yeah.
They took care of me when I was very little because my mother went to work. My dad left for the United States. So they played with me, and I just remember them very, very well.
What did they do for work?
I don't know what my grandfather did. I know my grandmother was home, cooking, baking, doing all those things. And my mother went to work, came back, and we lived with them when I was very little, before we came to the United States.
Where was this? What city?
It was called Podich. It's a very small city in Russia, and Babroysk is the nearest city, and a lot of them were moving to Babroysk, which a lot of our relatives have moved there since. And well, we came to the United States when I was eight and a half years old. And what else can I tell you?
Okay, about your parents.
My parents, well, my dad left when my mother was pregnant with me. He left for the United States. And I was with my mother all the time until I was 8 and a half, and then I first saw my dad. And we had a rough time. It was during the war. I was born in 1914, and there was a lot of commotion, and we had a rough time.
Okay, I remember your story of coming over across and hearing was it the woofs, or what did you hear when you came?
Well, we were coming to the United States. We had to cross, they called it a Greenwich. It's woods. We had to steal across the way. And it was about 50 miles. And I lost a shoe on the way, and I remember my mother carried me part of the way. And we were a group of people. I don't quite remember how many, but it was a small group. And the leader had matches and fire with him, and we ran across a wolf, and she lit the light, so the wolf just went out of the way, and we skipped there. And then there was a wedding on the way too, and we had to go hide, not to be seen. And so many things happened there. And then there was a big rain, and we had to turn back part of the way. And as a child, I still remember the hardships we had until we crossed that way, but we got safely across with a lot of hardship.
How'd you feed yourself and everything while doing that?
Well, I guess they took with food on our way, and when we came to a city, we ate there.
Crossed over to where? What city did you end up
That
going
I don't
to?
remember. I think it was Cherbourg, but being a child, I don't remember everything. I think it was called Cherbourg. And my mother took me to a place, to buy rolls. We ate a lot of rolls. There wasn't really all the meals, And I was a very thin child, although my mother gave me food, but I guess I didn't eat as much. And
Your sisters weren't
no,
born
my
yet?
sisters were born in the United States. So we finally came across, and we're on the boat. There was a lot of, a lot of people got sick and everything, but I think I was doing pretty good. My mother, was doing all right on the boat. But I remember seeing a lot of things there with people suffering.
So you were, you said about 8, 9 years old when you?
I was
Maybe?
8.5
Eight and
years
a
old
half?
when I came.
Yeah.
But also in Russia, before I came, we had so many rough parts, being born, during the fighting. So we were they tried to pull my mother away from me. There was some bandits came over and we were hidden under the ground by some Gentile people. And a baby started crying. So they pulled us out and they were going to arrest us and pull us away. They're pulling my mother with one hand and I pulled her with the other hand and I was screaming, "Don't take my mother." And somehow or other the main man that this group belonged to, the enemies, um, talked to my mother and they got us off.
Okay, so you were telling me about your mother.
Yes, when that main man that was the head of that group talked to her and got her off and we were saved. And then we had to go on a horse and buggy to different places and there was dead people on there too. And but that was the life. We just had to go from one place to the other. And until we came to the United States, which...
How did your family make a living there in Russia?
Well, my mother went to pick potatoes.
Potatoes.
Yeah, and she worked in the fields. And that's how she made it. I don't recall.
Did
how
you go to
it-
school then, or you was too
No,
young?
no, there was no school. And it was just rough all over. It was a war.
Were there a lot of relatives you lived with, or?
Well, I remember my grandparents. No, some of my relatives left for the United States. I remember my cousin Oscar was there. He was still in Europe. He traveled with us. We met him on the boat, going. And I don't remember anyone else. I met them all already when we were in the United States.
So you came through Europe and you went on the boat,
It was rough, and I remember when we saw the Statue of Liberty, how my mother took me on top there and says, "Look, this is freedom, this was the United States, this is the symbol," and we were so glad to see that. We were all so happy. And my dad met us there.
in New York?
In Ellis Island, when we got off. And I went up to him and I said, "Are you my daddy, Shlomo?" And he smiled. He says, "Yes, I am." And we moved from New York to Scranton, which there my dad had a job, worked in a furniture place. And we lived, I remember, upstairs in one of those, in a home. And there I met some cousins, quite a bit of Plotkins. They were all cousins, and they came much earlier. And from there I went to school. I started school probably 8.5, 9 years old, and I skipped quite a bit of grades in order to catch up because I couldn't speak English. And it was rough, but as a child, it's quicker. We learned pretty quick. And I was in Scranton with my family until I was 16. Then we moved to LA. And what can I tell you from now on?
Now, my name's Shlomo. I'm named after your dad?
You are named after my father, and your middle name is after your dad's mother. So you're Stephen Mark, because she was Mendel, and my dad was Shlomo. So you're named after two wonderful people.
And you came to Los Angeles. When did your sisters come in to get you?
Oh, my sisters were born in LA. Sarah was born after a while, and then Mary. And
So you're how many years apart?
12 years old with Sarah. Mary's gone, so there's Sarah and I. And I guess from now on it's a lot better. I have 2 children now, thank God for them, and Suzanne and Stephen, and grandchildren.
Now, who came over with you? You came over with your mom and
Just with my mom, and Oscar came up with us too. He
So
didn't
so your
travel with us.
Your grandparents.
My grandparents came later. The family brought them over. They lived with my mother quite a while, with my mother and dad, for many years. And then they moved in because my aunts, they were all here. They lived in Detroit previously, but my auntie Sonia was here, and Auntie Mary was here. And so we had a family here.
So your aunts were.
They were here previously, before we came.
How is everybody related to everybody? Tante.
My dad had two sisters, Mary and Sonia. And
That's my great aunt Mary. It was.
yes, yes. And what else do you want to know?
That was your dad had two sisters. Your mom didn't.
My mom had one sister here, and that was Irene's mother. She died a while back, but I don't recall her family because they died before. No, they were alive when I was born. Her dad was alive, and I was named Heike because they were alive, and I guess they didn't have who to name me after, so they named me after life. But Chaya means animal. An animal means life. So that's how that's how I was named. And my daughter was named after my mother's mother, Sorella, Suzanne.
So how did you meet Dad?
Dad was right here in L.A. We lived in sort of a court, and his sister lived in the court
Gertie?
right next to my parents. Her name was Gertie. And he came to visit her all the time. So one day the president was in L.A. and she offered her brother, to come and take me, but we didn't go that day. But he took me downtown once or twice and then he asked me for dates. And before we knew it, we started dating, and that's how we got married.
And what was Daddy doing then?
He worked in a gas station at the time.
Was that his own, or was Uncle Murray's? Or?
I don't remember whether he once had his own. Then he worked for Murray for a while. So I don't recall which was which, but he worked in a station at that time. And then the war came, and he worked for war efforts, And so it changed. Then he worked for a car industry. And
Studebaker.
Studebaker, Then he worked for McDonnell Douglas when he retired.
Oh, when you got married, where'd you live? Was that?
We rented a place in Boyle Heights, or what do they call it there? Well, it was Boyle Heights. It was all a Jewish community. And we lived there for 3 years. Then we bought a home in Montebello.
Was that Blanchard Street where you first moved, or was it somewhere else?
We lived on Blanchard Street. We bought a home on Blanchard Street first, yes.
That was the very first place?
Very first place. And that's where I lived when you were born and Susie was born. But much later we moved to Montebello, much later.
Montebello, I remember. Blanchard is a little, I remember the place.
Yeah,
it's a little
well,
big.
you were a baby.
Who lived near us in Blanchard?
Who else lived on Blanchard? Well, many of our friends. We had many friends.
Wasn't Sarah or somebody in there? Who was next door to us?
When Sarah got married, then I had a vacancy next door and she moved in. But otherwise, we're just friends living around.
Lena, I remember.
Yeah. And then we moved to...
Who was that was next door on the other side? What was her name?
The next house?
Yeah.
I don't recall. It's Rubens or whatever it is. the next house. But we had friends living there and a few houses away, and a lot of friends lived on Blanchard Street. It was a really nice place. And now I'm in the Fairfax district.
What do you know about Dad's family?
He's got a brother here and a sister. His mother died after we were married for quite a while.
What was her name?
Mendel. And his brother is, at the moment, he's 90 years old. And
What
he's
about his
doing
father?
pretty good. His father died. I never knew him. He died when he was younger. And my dad died when he was 52. He was a young man. He had leukemia. And he died. And his father, I think, died from probably heart attack. So, and his mother died a few years after we were married.
You've been married how many years?
52.
52.
52. It was nice years. Thank God. And we're very happy with our family.
Any other memories you have of way back that
Oh, it always
You
comes
would like
back to
to-
me, different things. I can't see how we lived through all these things that happened at that time. It was so rough. But being a child, I guess I was more or less taken care of. But, and as you know, my mother, your grandmother, died several years ago. But she was marvelous, took good care of me, and a real good grandmother to you
That's for
folks.
sure. That's for sure.
So that's how life goes. And so many things come to mind, but you know, when you talk, you don't know what to say.
What's coming to mind?
I mean, the rough parts, you know, that came.
Well, thank you, Mom, for doing this.
You're welcome, and I love you.